Welcome to the Deep Dive. So if you've been anywhere near the financial news lately, you've probably seen these pretty dramatic headlines.
Absolutely. Big shifts. We're talking about this buzz around, well, massive changes in crypto prices.
Yeah, and these huge predictions, trillions potentially flowing into Bitcoin and blockchain. It's a lot.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it signals this fascinating pivot, right? Where crypto is suddenly front and center in politics like we've, never really seen before.
Exactly. So our mission for you today is to really get into this. We're doing a deep dive on how crypto, blockchain, and high-level politics are mixing.
And specifically, how one major political figure's very public support seems to be shaking things up for the whole space.
Right. We're basing this on recent articles analysis from June 2025, looking at what this kind of political turnaround actually means.
We'll try to unpack the claims, figure out what's real, what might be hype.
And map out where things could be heading. So, yeah, let's just jump right in. It really wasn't that long ago, was it? That former President Trump was, pretty famous for calling Bitcoin a scam.
He absolutely did. A scam. Unequivocal.
But if you've been listening recently, his whole stance seems to have done a complete 180. What do you think is really going on there?
It's a massive U-turn, no doubt about it. His language now is just completely different.
Of what?
Well, he's on record saying things like, under my leadership, America will become the world's undisputed hub for blockchain, crypto, and AI innovation. Quite a statement.
That is quite a statement. Very different from scam.
Totally. And there's this other line he keeps using. If you're not supporting financial freedom, you're fighting the future.
Okay, so what's the underlying strategy, maybe?
Well, the insight from our sources suggests it's not just like a sudden love for the tech itself, it's more political. It's recognizing this growing group of people, voters perhaps, who really care about financial privacy, about decentralization, innovation.
The crypto community, basically.
Exactly. A large and potentially influential block. So crypto's kind of moved from being this niche tech thing into the mainstream political arena.
That makes sense. And okay, with that shift, we get these headlines screaming massive crypto game changer because of his support.
Right.
But what does massive actually mean here, according to the sources? It's not like he can just sign an order tomorrow, right?
Precisely. It's probably not about an instant law change or anything like that. It's more about opening the floodgates of momentum, as one source put it.
Momentum, okay.
How? Well, the analysis points to a few things. First, these implied policy promises, signaling a friendlier stance, maybe looser regulations for crypto companies here in the U.S.
Okay.
The SEC, and this might be the big one, it acts as an institutional signal.
Meaning
it makes it feel safer, more politically acceptable for the big players, funds, banks, even credit unions, corporations to finally start engaging seriously with digital assets.
Yeah, it takes away some of that perceived risk, maybe.
Exactly. And then there's the third layer, the cultural narrative.
The story around it.
Yeah. When you have a figure like a former or potentially future U.S. president aligning with crypto, it gives it a kind of legitimacy, maybe even more powerful in some ways than, say, getting a Bitcoin ETF approved.
Interesting. So it changes how people feel about it.
It subtly shifts that public perception, lowers the mental barrier for people or institutions that were maybe sitting on the fence.
Okay, which I guess leads us straight to that really big number, the trillions prediction.
The trillions, yes, the elephant in the room.
Is that just, hyperbole? Or is there something actually backing that up?
Well, the sources are clear. It's highly unlikely to happen overnight, let's be real.
Okay, great.
But they argue it's not entirely baseless either. There are factors at play.
Like what? What's the thinking there?
Okay, first off, Bitcoin ETFs. They've already cracked open the door for institutional investors, right?
Yeah.
Gave them a compliant way to get exposure.
Right, we saw that impact.
Now, think about global asset managers.
Yeah.
They control, it's hundreds of trillions of dollars worldwide.
Mind-boggling numbers.
Totally. So the argument is, even if they allocated a tiny fraction, say 1%, maybe up to 5% of that pool into Bitcoin.
The price impact would be enormous. Okay, I see the logic.
And this is where the political support comes back in. It acts like a catalyst.
How so?
It lowers the perceived risk for these giant institutions, the regulatory risk, the political risk. It basically gives them more confidence, maybe even cover, to make that allocation.
Okay, got it. Politics greases the wheels for the big money.
You could say that.
Yeah.
But there's another angle to this potential flood of money, too. Something called real-world assets in crypto, RWA.
RWA. Okay, heard the term. Let's break that down. What is that exactly?
So RWA is basically about taking tangible things from the physical world.
Like buildings, gold.
Exactly. Real estate, bonds, commodities, art, and representing them as digital tokens on a blockchain.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Well, imagine instead of needing millions to buy into a high-value office building, you could buy a small tokenized fraction of it through your crypto wallet.
Like owning tiny digital shares of real things.
Precisely. Or, another example from the source, earning interest from a U.S. government bond, but doing it all within that digital ecosystem, maybe via platforms like Webuoff.com was mentioned.
Interesting. So it makes those kinds of assets more accessible.
That's the big promise, yeah. Connecting the digital blockchain world with tangible, real-world value, and potentially democratizing access to investments that were previously pretty exclusive, turning illiquid assets into something more liquid.
Okay, so back to the trillions.
Right, so while trillions overnight is, again, probably hyperbole for now, the sources suggest the overall direction, the trajectory, it's pretty clear.
More money coming in.
More money, wider adoption, and growing legitimacy for digital assets. That seems to be the trend.
Which, as you said, brings us to this point where crypto is like genuinely a political football for the first time, really, in U.S. history.
Yeah, it's moved beyond just being about the tech.
Yeah.
Now it's tangled up with these big ideas, right?
Restricted freedom.
Control.
Privacy concerns, surveillance.
Economic independence, all that stuff. It resonates.
It really does. And the sources point out some pretty eye-catching headlines recently that show this shift.
Oh, yeah, some real sit up and take notice moments. Like, did you know Donald Trump actually has his own meme coin?
Wait, really?
Yeah, Tropai. The tagline is apparently, "Make meme coins great again." Hosted on Solana.
Wow, okay. That's something.
It is something. But it's not just meme coins. Look at Trump Media. Reportedly raised $2.4 billion while pivoting towards Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that got SEC approval.
Right. That's serious money. And wasn't there talk about stablecoin legislation?
Exactly. The Senate is expected to pass a stablecoin bill, which is seen as kind of the leading edge of a whole wave of crypto legislation likely coming down the pike.
So the government is definitely getting involved one way or another.
Oh, absolutely. And then you have the former president explicitly stating he wants to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world.
He actually said that.
Yep. And followed up with, "We're going to show the world how to win with digital assets like never before."
Strong words.
And there's more concrete stuff too. Trump Media apparently signed a deal to partner with Crypto.com for launching ETFs.
Okay, so these aren't just isolated things. It feels like a pattern.
It really does seem to be converging.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting for everyone listening, right? The adoption number.
Yeah, the scale is becoming significant. Check this out.
Yeah.
Estimates for 2025 suggest around 6.8% of the world's population own crypto.
Wow. What's that in actual people?
About 560 million users globally.
And in the U.S.?
In the U.S., it's even higher penetration. Around 28% of American adults. That's roughly 65 million people owning crypto.
28%, that's not niche anymore.
Not at all. And it's still growing. The report also mentioned that another 14% of Americans who don't own crypto plan to buy some in 2025. And beyond that, another 48% said they were open to it.
So the potential pool of users is still huge.
Massive potential. And politically speaking, that represents a very significant chunk of the electorate.
Yeah, you can see why it's getting attention. There's a quote in the source that really nails it, I think.
Which one?
Crypto has moved from code to the presidential suite, and that's a sign of how far we've come.
That sums it up pretty well.
So, pulling this back to the listener, why does all this matter to you?
Well, the point is, this big shift, it doesn't really matter what your politics are, it's happening. And it's likely going to reshape things.
Like regulation, market sentiment.
Yeah, regulation, market psychology, maybe even the kinds of financial products available to you. It's all interconnected.
And in this kind of fast-moving environment, knowing who's building the infrastructure for all this seems pretty important.
Crucial. And our source material highlights one company in particular, Metallicus, Inc., calling it a winning resource.
Okay. Why them?
Because they're seen as being right at that intersection, actively working to bridge the gap between traditional finance, banks and stuff, and the new Web3 world.
Building the rails, basically.
Exactly. Building the rails for this shift we're talking about.
Okay, so tell us a bit more about Metallicus. What makes them stand out here?
Well, they're a fintech and blockchain company based in San Francisco, started back in 2016.
Okay.
And their core mission, as stated, is to create this customer-centric digital asset banking network. The focus seems to be on security, compliance, usability, things traditional finance cares a lot about.
Makes sense if you're trying to bridge those worlds. So what do they actually offer? What are their products?
They've got a whole ecosystem, actually. For instance, there's MetalPay. That's their platform for consumers, making it easy to buy, sell, send crypto. It has features like automated recurring buys, P2P payments, pretty user-friendly stuff.
Okay, the consumer side. What about institutions?
Right. For them, they have Metalix. It's a decentralized exchange, a DX.
But aren't DXs usually kind of the Wild West?
Some can be. But the key thing about Metalix, according to the source, is that it's built with U.S. regulatory compliance in mind. That's huge.
Ah, okay. So it offers speed, security, DeFi features like lending, borrowing, but within a framework institutions might actually use.
That seems to be the goal, addressing that major compliance hurdle.
Gotcha. What else?
They also have the WebAuth wallet. This handles things like device authentication, managing digital identity, payments, crypto transactions, basically the tools you need to interact with Web 3.0. It's built on their XPR network.
Okay. Wallet exchange. What about the base layer?
A good question. They have Metal blockchain. This is described as a layer 0 blockchain.
Layer 0.
Yeah, think of it as a foundation. It's designed so that banks and other fintech companies can build their own customized blockchains or subchains on top of it.
Why would they want to do that?
Control, mostly. Privacy, security. It lets them manage assets and communicate securely in a way they're comfortable with while still getting the benefits of blockchain.
Okay, interesting. Bespoke blockchains for banks.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's Metal L2. This is a scaling solution for Ethereum.
Like Optimism or Arbitrum?
Exactly. It's actually part of the Optimism superchain. But again, with a focus on compliance. The idea is to create a smooth, regulated way for fiat money, regular dollars, to flow into the crypto world, both for people and businesses.
The on-ramp. Crucial piece.
Super crucial for mass adoption. And one last piece, the metal dollar, or XMD.
A stablecoin.
Sort of. It's described as a reserve-backed stablecoin index. It holds a basket of other major stablecoins, USDC, PYUSD, USDP, inside a smart contract.
Ah, so it diversifies the risk instead of relying on just one stablecoin issuer.
That's the idea. Risk distribution built into the stable asset itself.
Okay, so Metallicus seems to be building a pretty comprehensive stack there, really trying to connect all the dots.
Yeah, from the user wallet right down to the base blockchain layer, and focusing on that compliance angle to bring traditional players in.
Right. So let's kind of wrap this up. What we're really seeing here is it feels like a genuinely profound shift, doesn't it? This political embrace of digital assets.
It really does feel historic. More than just headlines, it could be, as the source says, history in the making, something that fundamentally reshapes finance down the road.
So what's the takeaway for listeners?
I think the main thing is just to keep watching this space, this intersection of politics and protocols. It's clearly heating up.
Yeah, and the future here isn't just going to be decided by coders in basements anymore, right?
Exactly. Crypto is becoming, or aiming to become, money for all people. And politicians are definitely waking up to the power and maybe the votes in that idea.
So as this major political figure and potentially others throw their weight behind digital assets, behind this emerging tech, the sources say global markets are bracing for a potentially historic financial shift.
It's a big claim, but the signals are there.
So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. What specific parts of your own financial life, or even your digital life, might be the first ones touched by this kind of shift? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. Especially when you hear quotes like, "We're going to show the world how to win." Makes you wonder what that win looks like.